The plate was still warm when the manager grabbed it before it could reach the trash. "Stop." The waitress flinched, fingers loosening around the edge of the dish. The smell of half-eaten steak, reheated rice, and thick brown sauce hung in the air, mixing with grease and disinfectant. She looked down at it, then back up at him. "That's leftover," she said quietly. The manager tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if she'd just said something stupid. He leaned closer so no one else could hear. "That's $14, he said. 14, you planning to throw money away now?" She swallowed. "Sir, someone already ate from that, so..." His mouth twitched into a grin. "You think food knows?" She glanced toward the dining room. Lunch rush had slowed, but a few tables were still full. At the corner booth by the window sat a man alone, posture straight, hands folded calmly in front of him. Black wool coat draped neatly on the chair beside him. Hair perfectly combed, he studied the menu like he wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. The manager followed her eyes and snorted. "Japanese?" he muttered. "They don't understand half of what we say anyway." Her chest tightened. "That's not make it look decent." He cut in, add garnish, rearrange it. Profit is profit. She felt heat rise to her face. "I can't serve that to someone." The manager's smile disappeared. "You want shifts next week." The question hung there sharp and quiet. Her mind raced. Rent, bills, her mother's medication. The manager straightened his tie and lowered his voice even more. "Plate it, now." She stared at the food like it might disappear if she waited long enough. When it didn't, she picked it up. Her hands shook as she wiped the rim, scooped the rice back into a neat shape, placed a sprig of parsley on top like it could erase what it was. Every step toward the booth felt heavier than the last. She set the plate down gently. The man looked up and smiled politely. "Excuse me," he said. "This is not my order." Her heart skipped. The accent was light, controlled, but the English was perfect. I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "Let me take that back and..." She reached for the plate. A hand slammed down hard on the table, rattling silverware. "Don't." The manager was suddenly there, towering beside her, smile already pasted on his face. Nearby conversations quieted. A couple at the next table glanced over. "This is exactly what you ordered," the manager said brightly. The man blinked. "No, I ordered grilled salmon. That's what this is," the manager said without missing a beat. The waitress stared at him. "Sir," he shot her a look so sharp it shut her mouth instantly. The man's eyes flicked between them. "This is beef." The manager laughed loudly. Too loudly. "You people always get confused." The word hit the waitress like a slap. "You people," the man repeated calmly. The manager leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening. "Eat it, panda, or leave. We don't have time for games." The dining room went silent. The waitress felt her pulse in her ears. "That's enough," she said, voice shaking but loud enough to carry. The manager turned on her slowly. "Go back to the kitchen." The man pushed his chair back and stood. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, placing it carefully on the table. "I don't want trouble," he said evenly. "Keep the money." He bowed his head slightly, a gesture so calm it made the insult before it feel even uglier, then turned toward the exit. The manager's eyes locked onto the open wallet. "Wait," he said, rushing forward. Sir, please. No need to leave angry." His tone shifted completely, dripping with false kindness. He stepped into the man's path. "Drinks on us. Complimentary. Apology from the house." "I don't drink," the man replied. The manager was already waving to the bar. "One drink on me." A glass appeared in his hand. As he leaned forward, the liquid sloshed violently, pouring straight down the man's coat. "Oh my goodness," the manager gasped. "I'm so sorry." The waitress saw it clearly now. The angle, the timing, the way his hand twisted the glass. "It's fine," the man said, glancing down. "I'll handle it." No, the manager insisted, already grabbing the coat. "Please, we'll wash it. Our responsibility." The man hesitated, then slowly removed the coat and handed it over. The manager disappeared into the back. Minutes passed. The waitress stood frozen, heart pounding. Something felt wrong, more wrong than before. She wiped tables that were already clean, eyes flicking toward the hallway. When the manager didn't return, she moved closer. The office door was slightly open. She peeked inside. The safe was open. Her stomach dropped. She stepped back just as footsteps echoed. The manager emerged, coat folded over his arm, smiling like nothing had happened. "Go back to work," he said sharply. She nodded and turned away, but her hands were shaking. In her apron pocket, her fingers brushed against a thin hairpin. She waited, counted breaths. When the office door opened again and then closed, she slipped inside. The safe clicked open easier than she expected. Stacks of cash, receipts, and they're tucked between bills. A folded $100 note with faint blue stains along the edges. Her chest tightened. She grabbed it. "Hey!" The shout slammed into her spine. The office flooded with movement. 2 police officers stepped in, hands resting on their belts. Behind them stood the manager, face twisted into practiced outrage. "She stole from me," he said loudly. "We caught her on CCTV. The waitress's mouth went dry. Save it." One officer said, "Turn around." The dining room buzzed with whispers. Then a calm voice cut through everything. "That money is mine." Every head turned. The man stood near the doorway, coat still damp, expression unreadable. "And I understand English very well." The room fell completely silent. The manager laughed first. It was sharp and quick, the kind of laugh meant to signal confidence, not humor. He stepped forward, positioning himself just slightly in front of the police officers, like he owned the space. "This man is confused," he said, waving a dismissive hand toward the customer. "He doesn't even know what's happening." Language barrier. The man didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He simply met the officer's eyes. "I am not confused," he said, "and that bill was taken from my wallet." The waitress stood frozen, the cold metal of the safe handle still against her palm. One officer glanced at her, then at the man. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "you're saying this employee stole your money?" "No," the man replied. "I am saying your manager did." The dining room erupted into murmurs. "That's ridiculous," the manager snapped. She was caught red-handed. "Check the cameras." He pointed dramatically toward the ceiling. "She broke into my safe." The waitress's throat burned. "I was trying to—" "Don't speak." The manager barked. "You've said enough." The officer raised a hand. Everyone calmed down. The man took a slow step forward. "May I explain?" The manager opened his mouth, but the officer nodded. "Go ahead." The man straightened his jacket, his movements unhurried, deliberate. "I came here because I received multiple complaints," he said. Complaints from tourists, from students, from people who did not speak English well. They all described the same thing. The manager scoffed. "Oh, please." They were overcharged. The man continued. "Served incorrect food, insulted, and when they protested, they were made to feel stupid or small." The waitress felt her eyes sting. The officer frowned. "You're saying this was planned?" "Yes," the man said. "This restaurant has been targeting foreigners." The manager's face darkened. "This is a lie. He's trying to cover for her." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I am a journalist." That word landed heavier than any shout. A ripple moved through the room. "I investigate consumer fraud." The man went on calmly. "I visit places like this pretending to be an ordinary customer." The manager's smile wavered for the first time. "I record patterns," the man said, "behavior, language, actions." He looked directly at the waitress. "And I test people." The officer crossed his arms. "Do you have proof?" The man nodded once. "Yes." The manager laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. "This is insane. He spilled a drink on himself, gave us money, and now he's making stories." "I marked the bill," the man said quietly. The room leaned in without realizing it. "Before I placed it on the table." He continued. "I applied a transparent dye to the edges. It is invisible under normal light." The manager's eyes flicked just for a second toward the waitress's hand. "But under blue light?" The man said, "It stains." The officer turned to the waitress. "The bill you took from the safe, does it have marks?" She opened her trembling hand and unfolded the money. Even without special light, faint bluish smudges were visible along the corners. A murmur spread through the room. The manager's jaw clenched. That proves nothing. The man nodded. That is why I also asked for alcohol. He looked at the officer. Alcohol removes the outer coating. That is why he spilled it on my coat. The manager took a step back. And then he offered to wash it. The man continued, which gave him access to my wallet. Silence. The officer turned slowly toward the manager. Is that true? Of course not. The manager said quickly. This girl probably took it when she passed by. The waitress shook her head, tears spilling now. I never touched his wallet. I saw the safe open. You saw nothing. The manager snapped. You broke into my office. The officer held up a hand. We'll check the footage. The manager's confidence snapped back into place. Gladly. They moved to the monitor near the bar. Customers craned their necks. The footage played. There she was, slipping into the office. Hairpin in hand, the safe opening, there. The manager shouted, clear as day. Keep watching. The man said calmly. The video continued. Minutes earlier, the manager entered the office alone. The safe opened. He reached inside. He looked around. The waitress felt the room hold its breath. The officer paused the video. Why did you open the safe before the incident? The manager stammered. I needed change. The man shook his head slightly. That was after I gave the bill. The officer rewound again, slowed it down. The manager removed something small, folded, blue edges. The officer turned. Sir, he said firmly, turn around. The manager's face drained of color. This is a misunderstanding. The man stepped closer. You insulted me. You tried to steal from me, and you framed her. The waitress sobbed quietly. The manager suddenly pointed at her again. She knew she helped him. The officer shook his head. Enough. He snapped cuffs around the manager's wrists. Gasps filled the room. As he was led away, the manager twisted back, eyes burning. You think this changes anything? The man didn't answer. The officer turned to the waitress. You're free to go. She sank against the counter, knees weak. The man approached her slowly. You did the right thing, he said gently. She wiped her face. I thought I was going to jail. He smiled softly. Integrity is quiet, but it speaks eventually. The officer cleared his throat. Sir, you mentioned complaints. Yes, the man replied. This will not be the last investigation. He turned to the waitress. And you? She looked up. I could use someone like you, he said. Someone who chooses right even when it costs. Her breath caught. What? What do you mean? I'm opening a public report, he said. And I need a translator, assistant, and witness. He handed her a card. The room buzzed again. This time different. Justice had a sound, and it was only halfway done. The police didn't leave right away. They stood there longer than anyone expected. Radios crackling softly. One officer taking photos of the office. The open safe. The CCTV screen frozen on the frame where the manager's hand hovered over the marked bill. Customers whispered, some recording on their phones, others suddenly finding reasons to stare very hard at their menus. The waitress stayed where she was, back against the counter, hands clasped together so tightly her fingers hurt. Every few seconds she replayed it in her head, the cuffs clicking shut, the manager's face draining, the sound his voice made when he realized the story wasn't bending his way anymore. The man, no, the journalist, stood a few feet away, calm as if he hadn't just flipped an entire room upside down. One officer approached him. Sir, we're going to need a formal statement. Of course, he said. I've already prepared documentation. That surprised her, prepared, like this had been planned down to the minute. The officer nodded, then turned to the waitress. You'll need to give one too. Her stomach tightened again. Am I in trouble? No, he said, softer now. You helped return stolen property. She nodded quickly, afraid if she spoke more her voice would break. The manager was gone now, escorted out the side door, still shouting about misunderstandings and lawsuits. The sound of his voice faded, but the tension he'd built over months, years, lingered like smoke. When the officers finally stepped outside, the room exhaled. Someone clapped. One person, then another. The waitress flinched, embarrassed, overwhelmed. She didn't know where to look. The journalist walked over to the table where he'd been sitting earlier. His coat lay folded neatly, stains still visible but ignored. He picked up his wallet, checked it once, then slipped it into his pocket. "You were very brave," he said to her quietly. She shook her head. "I was terrified," he smiled slightly. "Bravery usually is." She let out a shaky laugh despite herself. "You really are a journalist, yes. And you knew all along." "I suspected," he corrected. Suspicion becomes knowledge only after proof. She thought about that. About how many times she'd watched the manager do things like this. Small at first, rounding up bills, making jokes she hated, serving cold food to people who didn't complain loudly enough. "Why didn't you stop him sooner?" she asked before she could stop herself. The man didn't look offended. He considered the question. "Because stories like this don't change with whispers," he said. "They change with evidence." The restaurant manager, new, temporary, came out from the back, pale and sweating. We're closing early today," he announced weakly. Customers gathered their things. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave her small nods of respect as they passed. When the room finally emptied, the silence felt heavier than the noise had been. The waitress slumped into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her all at once. Her hands were still shaking. The journalist sat across from her, folding his hands the same way he had before, calm and steady. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about the job." She blinked. "I don't even know your name." He smiled. "Kenji?" She repeated it quietly. "Kenji? You wouldn't be working for me immediately?" He went on. "There will be hearings, reports, possibly court." "Court?" Her chest tightened again. "I've never been to court." "I'll be there," he said, "and I won't let them twist what happened." She stared at the table. "The manager always said no one would believe me." Kenji leaned forward slightly. "People say that when they're afraid of being exposed." She swallowed. "What if he comes after me?" "He won't," Kenji said simply. "People like him rely on shadows. Once light touches them, they disappear." A knock echoed from the door. Another officer stepped back inside. "Ma'am," he said to the waitress, "we're going to need you to come down to the station later this week, just to finalize paperwork." She nodded. "Okay." After he left, Kenji slid his card toward her again. "Think about it," he said. "Not just the job, what kind of life you want after today." She picked up the card, fingers trembling. "I've never had choices," she admitted. Kenji's expression softened. "You made one today." The restaurant lights dimmed as the temporary manager shut things down. The smell of old food and cleaner suddenly made her nauseous. "I don't think I can work here anymore," she said. "You shouldn't," Kenji agreed, "not after what you've seen." She stood slowly, apron still tied around her waist, like a reminder of everything she'd put up with. She untied it and folded it carefully, setting it on the counter. Kenji watched her. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She nodded. "My sister's place." "Good." They walked out together. The afternoon sun felt too bright, like the world hadn't realized something important had just shifted. As Kenji turned to leave, she hesitated. "Why me?" she asked. He paused. "Because when everyone else stayed quiet, you didn't." She watched him walk away, card warm in her hand, heart pounding with fear and something else she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. And somewhere in a cold holding room, the manager sat alone for the first time, realizing the people he'd mocked, used, and underestimated were no longer silent. Justice wasn't finished yet. Not even close. 3 days later, the restaurant's sign was still dark. The waitress stood across the street, staring at it like it might blink back on and pretend nothing happened. Yellow tape cut across the front door. A printed notice flapped in the window, temporarily closed under investigation. People walked past, some slowing down, some whispering. A few took pictures. She hugged her jacket tighter around herself. Part of her felt relief. Another part felt exposed, like the ground beneath her had shifted and she wasn't sure where to put her feet anymore. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello, good morning," Kenji's voice said, calm as ever. "Are you free today?" She glanced at the closed restaurant again. "I think so." "Good," he said. "I'd like you to come with me." "Where?" "The station, then somewhere else." That didn't calm her nerves at all, but she said yes anyway. An hour later, she sat in a small interview room at the police station, hands folded in her lap. A recorder sat on the table between her and two officers. Kenji sat beside her, notebook open, pen resting but unused. "Take your time," one officer said. "Just tell us what you saw." She took a breath and began. She talked about the leftovers, the comments, the way the manager always chose who to target: tourists, students, people with accents. She talked about the fear, the threats about shifts, the jokes that weren't jokes. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. When she finished, the room was quiet. "That matches other statements," the officer said. "You're not the first employee to mention this." Her eyes widened. "Other employees?" Kenji nodded. "They came forward after the arrest." Something loosened in her chest. She hadn't been alone. She just hadn't known it. After the station, Kenji drove. He didn't tell her where they were going, just asked if she trusted him. She wasn't sure why, but she did. They stopped in front of a quiet building with glass doors and a small brass sign. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and paper instead of grease and oil. "This is where I work," Kenji said. The office was simple: desks, shelves of files, a corkboard covered in notes and photos. On one wall, a large map with red pins scattered across the city. "These are places under investigation," he explained when he saw her looking. She swallowed. "All restaurants." "Not all," he said. "Some hotels, some stores, anywhere power meets silence." He handed her a cup of tea and gestured for her to sit. "I won't pressure you," he said, "but I want you to understand what this means." He explained the process: articles, evidence, public records, how stories like hers didn't just punish one manager, they changed systems. "And people will talk," he added gently, "not all of it kind." Her stomach twisted. "They already are," he nodded. "Truth is uncomfortable, that's how you know it matters." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown account. "You ruined everything." Then another. "Hope you're proud." Her hands started to shake. Kenji noticed immediately. "Let me see." She showed him. He sighed. "It begins." "What if he comes after me?" she asked, fear creeping back in. "He won't," Kenji said again, but this time his voice was firmer. "Because now he's not fighting one person. He's fighting a record." He stood and pinned a new note to the board, her restaurant's name. "You're protected," he said, "and you're not invisible anymore." Later that evening, she sat alone in her sister's apartment, scrolling through her phone. The story was already spreading. Short clips, blurry screenshots, headlines that didn't use her name but told her story. Manager arrested after alleged discrimination and theft. Comments poured in, some supportive, some cruel. She set the phone down, heart pounding. Had she done the right thing? A knock came at the door. Her sister peeked out from the kitchen, worry etched on her face. "There are reporters downstairs," she whispered. The waitress closed her eyes. This was bigger than she'd imagined, and somewhere else in the city, in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and metal. The former manager stared at the wall, hands shaking for a very different reason. Because for the first time, he understood something he'd never believed before. Silence had protected him, and it was gone. The next morning, her name was still not public, but her life already felt like it was. She woke to her sister shaking her gently. "You need to see this." The TV was on low volume. A news anchor sat behind a glass desk, serious expression, restaurant logo blurred on the screen behind her. "Authorities say the investigation is ongoing, with multiple witnesses now coming forward." Her chest tightened. Witnesses, plural. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the coffee table. Messages from old coworkers she barely knew. Some apologizing, some thanking her, some admitting they'd seen the same things and never said anything. One message stood out. "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for speaking." She stared at it for a long time. The knock at the door came again, this time louder. Her sister froze. Should I open it? Before she could answer, Kenji's voice came through the door. It's me. Relief flooded her so fast her knees felt weak. Kenji stepped inside, calm as ever, though there were dark circles under his eyes. Reporters are circling the block. He said, I told them nothing without consent. She nodded. I didn't know it would explode like this. It always does when the pattern is clear, he replied. People recognize their own pain in someone else's story. They sat at the kitchen table. Kenji pulled out his notebook, but didn't open it yet. I need to ask you something, he said, and you can say no. She braced herself. Okay, I want to publish the full piece, with detail, with context, with your voice. Her breath caught, with my name, eventually, he said honestly, but not today. Fear crept back in. What happens if I do? Kenji met her eyes. People will believe you, and some will hate you for it. She thought of the messages, the support, the threats. And if I don't, she asked, then the story still runs, he said, but it won't be as strong. Silence settled between them. I'm tired of being quiet, she said finally. Kenji nodded once. Then we move carefully. Later that day, they met with a lawyer Kenji trusted. A woman with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waver. You did nothing wrong, the lawyer said firmly after hearing everything. They may try to intimidate you. They may try to discredit you. The waitress swallowed. How? By making you look emotional, the lawyer replied. Or dishonest, or small. Kenji's jaw tightened. They will fail, the lawyer continued, but only if you stay consistent. That night, the first long-form article went live. It didn't use her name. It didn't need to. It described the leftovers, the slur, the wallet, the marked bill, the safe, the arrest. It described a waitress who chose integrity when it cost her everything. The response was immediate. Other tourists came forward. Photos, receipts, similar stories, same manager, same insults. The restaurant's parent company issued a statement within hours, distancing themselves. The former manager's lawyer issued one too. My client denies all allegations and claims he is the victim of an elaborate setup. She read that line 3 times, disbelief hardening into anger. He's still lying, she said quietly. Kenji nodded. That's expected. What if people believe him? They won't, Kenji said, because lies collapse when stacked too high. The court date was set quickly. The night before, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her sister's couch, lights off, city noise humming outside. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. You think you won? Her fingers trembled. Another message followed. You're nothing, always were. Tears blurred her vision. She typed a response, then deleted it. Instead, she forwarded the messages to Kenji. His reply came seconds later. Documented. Don't engage. You're not alone. In the courtroom, the former manager looked smaller. No expensive suit, no confident grin, just stiff posture and darting eyes. When she took the stand, her legs shook so badly she thought she might fall. Kenji sat behind her. She didn't look at him, but she felt his presence. She told the truth, slowly, clearly. The defense tried to trip her up. Isn't it true you accessed the safe illegally? Yes, she said. To return stolen money. Isn't it possible you misunderstood your manager's intentions? No. Isn't it possible you're exaggerating because you were angry? She lifted her chin. I was scared, not angry. A murmur ran through the room. Then Kenji testified. He explained the die, the pattern, the prior complaints, the recordings, the intent. The judge listened, closely. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. Just words. Guilty. The former manager's shoulders sagged. He didn't look at her as he was led away. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Kenji shielded her gently. You don't have to say anything. She surprised herself. She stepped forward. I just want people to know, she said, voice steady. That silence protects the wrong people. The clip went everywhere. That night, she sat alone again. But this time, the quiet felt different. Her phone buzzed one last time, a new message from Kenji. When you're ready, the job is yours. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. For the first time in her life, the future wasn't something happening to her. It was something she could choose, and the story, Her story wasn't over yet. The morning after the verdict, the city felt unfamiliar. Not louder, not quieter, just different. She walked alone for the first time since everything happened. Hoodie pulled up, sunglasses on, hoping to blend into the crowd. People passed her without looking twice, and for a moment she wondered if all of it had only existed inside courtrooms and headlines. Then her phone buzzed, a notification from a news app. Former restaurant manager sentenced. Investigation expands citywide. Her chest tightened. It was real, still moving, still growing. She stopped at a crosswalk and watched the light change, thinking about how close she'd been to staying silent. How easy it would have been to look away. How different everything would be. Her phone buzzed again. Kenji, office at 10, no pressure. She stared at the message, then typed back, "I'll be there." The office looked the same as before. Quiet, focused, purposeful. But now, when she stepped inside, people looked up. Not with curiosity, with respect. Kenji greeted her with a nod. Good timing. He handed her a folder. Inside were printed emails, handwritten notes, copies of receipts. Stories that looked painfully familiar, more places. She said softly, "Yes," he replied, "and more victims." They sat together, side by side, reviewing cases. He showed her how to organize statements, how to verify timelines, how to separate emotion from fact without erasing humanity. "You don't lose compassion by being precise," he told her, "you protect it." Hours passed without her noticing. At lunch, she realized something strange. She wasn't afraid, not of phones, not of doors opening, not of being seen. Later that afternoon, a young woman entered the office hesitantly, accent thick, eyes tired, hands clenched in front of her. "I was told you help people," the woman said. Kenji looked at the waitress. No, his colleague now, and gestured gently. "She does." The woman's story spilled out in fragments. Underpaid shifts, insults masked as jokes, money missing from pay envelopes. The waitress listened, really listened. When the woman finished, tears streaking her face, she reached across the table and held her hand. "You're not imagining it," she said, "and you're not alone." Something clicked inside her then. This wasn't just a job, it was a mirror, a bridge. That evening, she went back to the restaurant street. Not to the building, but nearby. A small food stall sat on the corner, run by an older man who greeted everyone the same way. She ordered soup and sat on a bench, steam rising into the cool air. A man sat beside her, middle-aged, nervous. "You're her," he said quietly. Her body tensed. "I don't know what you mean." He nodded toward his phone, from the story. She considered leaving. Instead, she stayed. "My daughter works kitchens." He continued. "She's scared all the time. I showed her what you did." Her throat tightened. "She quit yesterday," he said. "Said she won't be treated like that anymore." Tears burned her eyes. "I'm glad." He stood, bowed his head slightly, and walked away. She sat there long after her soup went cold. Days turned into weeks. The investigation widened. Fines were issued. Licenses revoked. Policies rewritten. Some owners fought back. Others apologized. The former manager tried once more. An appeal. It failed. One afternoon, Kenji handed her a final envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Your contract." He said. She opened it slowly. Salary, benefits, a title she'd never imagined seeing next to her name. She looked up at him. "Why me?" Kenji smiled faintly. "Because you understand what power feels like from the other side." She signed. That night, she called her sister. "I got the job," she said. There was cheering on the other end of the line. As she hung up, she thought about the girl she'd been behind that counter, hands shaking, voice small, convinced the world wouldn't listen. She wished she could tell her something. That silence breaks. That truth travels. That sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one about to change everything. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment across the city, a disgraced former manager stared at a rejection letter, realizing too late that the people he dismissed as weak had built something stronger than fear. Justice didn't shout, it endured, and she was only just beginning. The following week, the office buzzed in a way she had never experienced before. Phones ringing, emails pinging, new cases arriving, all stacking up in neat little piles waiting to be unraveled. She moved from desk to desk, helping victims recount events, verifying statements, organizing evidence. Every time she told someone, she felt the old fear creep in for just a second, and then it left, replaced by certainty. Kenji watched her carefully from across the room. "You're good at this," he said quietly, "better than I expected." She shook her head. "I'm still learning." "No," he insisted, "you see patterns, you notice fear, hesitation. You notice when someone is lying or being intimidated. That's a gift." She smiled faintly, though she didn't feel like she deserved it. A knock at the door drew their attention. A young man stepped inside, holding a thick envelope. I think this belongs to you," he said, looking first at her, then at Kenji. Inside the envelope were dozens of letters, handwritten, typed, some folded carefully, others crumpled, all thanking her for speaking up, all sharing stories of injustice, stories she had never heard, people she would never have met. Her hands trembled as she held the first letter. The words were raw, honest, sometimes broken, sometimes angry, but all of them filled with hope. Kenji leaned over her shoulder. "See, you're already changing things." She nodded, swallowing hard. "It's overwhelming. It's the beginning," Kenji corrected, "not the end." Later, they went out to meet someone who had filed a complaint against another restaurant in the city. The building was small, cramped, the smell of cooking floating through the open windows. She walked inside with Kenji, greeting the manager, this time carefully, professionally. No fear, no hesitation. The client, a young woman from overseas, sat quietly in a corner, hands folded nervously. She glanced up as the waitress approached. You're her," she whispered. "Yes," she said softly, "I'll help you." The woman relaxed slightly. For the first time, someone believed her story. Back in the office, Kenji handed her a tablet. "We need a record of everything. You'll help input the testimonies." Hours passed. She typed, organized, verified. Each story was a reminder of what had happened to her, and what could have happened if she had stayed silent. She realized how small, seemingly powerless moments, the decision to speak, to act, to intervene, could ripple outward like a stone tossed in water. At dinner that night, she sat alone, replaying the week in her mind. Every conversation, every witness, every report she'd touched, it all made her feel lighter somehow. The weight of fear and silence had been replaced by responsibility, purpose. She thought about the manager, defeated and humiliated, and a strange sense of satisfaction rose inside her. Not revenge, just clarity. The truth had been restored. The next morning, she arrived at the office early. The city was still waking up. Cars honked in the distance, vendors set up their stalls, and the first few clients arrived, timid but hopeful. She took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and stepped inside. Kenji appeared beside her, ready for today. She nodded firmly. "I am." He smiled, faint but proud. "Good, remember, integrity is contagious." The day moved quickly. Witnesses came, statements were recorded, evidence collected. She felt a rhythm forming, like a pulse in her chest. Purpose, drive, focus. She realized how far she had come from the day she had been forced to serve leftover food to someone she didn't even know, under threats and insults, while the world seemed indifferent. Now, she had a voice. Now, she had power. Not power to hurt, but to protect, to stand, to change the narrative. That afternoon, a news alert popped up on her phone. Another restaurant investigation was unfolding in a neighboring district. She showed Kenji. "Looks like our work is multiplying," he said calmly. "Good," she replied, but inside she felt something else, responsibility, a fire that wouldn't be quenched. Later that evening, she walked home through the streets, city lights reflecting off wet pavement. Her thoughts returned to the Japanese journalist, the calmest man in the restaurant that day, whose silence had been stronger than anger, whose patience had exposed greed. She realized that the people who made the loudest noise were not always the ones holding power. Sometimes, power lived in the quiet, measured, unwavering heart. She reached her apartment, unlocked the door, and paused. The envelope from earlier still lay on the table, filled with letters from strangers. She picked one up at random, read a few lines, then another. Their stories, their courage, their hope. They were hers now too. She set the letters down and stared out the window. The city stretched before her, endless, full of challenges and opportunities. She felt ready, not because she was fearless, but because she had learned to act despite fear. Because she had learned that silence protects the wrong people, and that speaking up, even softly, can change everything. And somewhere in that city, a former manager sat in regret, alone, realizing too late that underestimating the quiet and the overlooked was the greatest mistake he had ever made. Justice had a way of finding the right hands, and she had found hers. The final morning arrived like any other, quiet but heavy with anticipation. She walked into the office, notebook in hand, ready for another day of recording statements and verifying claims. Yet something felt different. The energy in the room was sharper, more electric. Kenji was already there, standing near the window, watching the streets below. "Today is big," he said without turning. She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He finally faced her, expression serious. "The full report goes live today. All names anonymized for protection. Evidence, witness statements, CCTV, everything compiled. This is the moment when the city sees it all." Her stomach twisted. Excitement mixed with nerves. The city hadn't just been watching the former manager. Now it would witness the web he'd woven, the way he exploited fear and silence, and the courage it took to stand against it. Kenji handed her a tablet. "Take a look before it publishes. You deserve to see the work." She scrolled through the report. Every page detailed abuse, theft, discrimination, harassment. It read like a pattern stretched across months, maybe years. And in the center was the story of the restaurant. Her story. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the narrative of bravery, integrity, and quiet intervention was unmistakable. She felt a tightness in her chest. This is everything, not everything," Kenji corrected. "There's one more part." He led her out of the office and into a small conference room. A camera crew was set up, journalists from local networks waiting silently. Behind the cameras were screens showing the former manager's restaurant, now boarded up, a closed for investigation, sign still swinging in the wind. Kenji leaned close. "They want an exclusive. They want the truth from someone who was there." Her hands shook. This was it, the moment she'd feared, the moment she'd secretly hoped for. She could step back, hide again, or she could step forward and finally speak for everyone who hadn't been heard. She straightened her spine. "I'll do it," she said, voice steady. The journalist, once a stranger she'd only seen as a calm presence in a corner booth, smiled encouragingly. "Your voice matters." They began recording. She recounted the events at the restaurant, the manager's cruelty, the leftover food, the insults, the theft, the CCTV evidence, the marked money. She explained how she had tried to protect the customer, how fear had pushed her to act, and how standing up ultimately exposed the truth. Kenji sat behind the cameras, taking notes, but she barely noticed. Her words gained power with each sentence. Each pause allowed the weight of the story to sink in. And when she described the Japanese journalist's calm patience, the audience could feel it, the quiet dignity that revealed greed and malice. When she finished, the room was silent. Not a single word, just the hum of electricity in the air, the quiet clicking of the camera winding down. Then applause, not loud, not forced, but real. One by one, journalists, assistants, and even Kenji clapped. She blinked, overwhelmed. Kenji stood and walked to her side. "You've done more than report. You've inspired. You've shown integrity." A message buzzed on her phone. It was from the Japanese journalist, Kenji's colleague. "We'll need you on the next story. You've proven yourself. Are you in?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. One word typed itself into her mind, "Yes." And just like that, a new chapter began. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet victories inside the office. But the ripple had begun. Restaurants were being audited, complaints investigated, policies rewritten. Former manager's career, his life of manipulation and intimidation, was over. Inside, the waitress, no, now a professional investigator, assistant, and witness for truth, looked at Kenji. "Thank you," she said softly. He smiled, faint but knowing. "No, thank yourself. You made the choice when it counted." She thought back to that first day, the leftover plate, the insult, the fear that had nearly silenced her. And now the world saw what had happened. Justice had been served, not by anger, not by shouts, but by calm, measured courage. Kenji stepped aside and gestured toward the door. "The next assignment waits." She took a deep breath, shoulders back, eyes clear. "Then let's go." And as she stepped out into the sunlight, the city around her seemed brighter, not because the sun was stronger, but because for the first time, she knew her voice could change everything. Justice had been claimed, silence shattered, and she, the quiet girl who had once trembled behind a counter, now walked forward as a force no one could ignore. Subscribe to Aria's Stories.